Hey everyone, welcome to The New Populist. I'm Dave Brown. I want to talk about the Great Reset. Now, I'm sure all of you have seen people bring this up on Twitter or on Facebook. And when it's referred to, it's always in a vague sort of way. I guess we all have the general idea of what it is. And in a nutshell, during this pandemic, the world elite want to use this as an opportunity to overhaul or recalibrate a lot of our global issues. Now, when you talk about this, you have to be careful because if you're not specific, you can easily be called a conspiracy theorist. If you look on Wikipedia, they accuse Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, and other right-leaning commentators as being people who are spreading misinformation or propaganda. And I want to avoid that. So what I will do is go to the source of the information himself, and that is Klaus Schwab. Now, if you're not familiar with Klaus Schwab, he is the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum. And in 2020, they had their 50th annual meeting. And the theme for the meeting was the Great Reset. Now, me and you, we did not get the invite, but lucky for us, Klaus Schwab wrote the book, COVID-19, the Great Reset. And so we have all the information right here. So what I'm going to do is do a series of videos where I'm going to focus on one particular issue in each one and highlight, really bring attention to how the global elite are viewing issues so that when we talk about it, we have some very specific information. And the first topic I want to talk about is the issue of China. Now, I think we're all sort of aware of the fact that the Western elites are very careful when they speak of China and are very careful not to condemn them and their behavior. And this book is no different. One thing we have to keep in mind is he's a European and his viewpoint of China is a little different than ours. Unfortunately, many Americans, many politicians also share that viewpoint. The NBA, Hollywood, among others. So this prevailing attitude where we treat China with kid gloves is a continuing theme. And there's an excerpt that I want to read that shows you how they sort of justify this attitude. On page 120, he writes this: "Views, of course, differ radically on which country is right or going to come out on top by benefiting from the perceived weaknesses and fragilities of the other. But it is essential to contextualize them. There isn't a right view and a wrong view, but different and often diverging interpretations that frequently correlate with the origin, culture, and personal history of those who profess them." So what we see here is sort of a neutral stance where he doesn't want to put his foot down and say, this is right, this is wrong. It's a continuum. There's points of views. You're over here and you have your culture and your language and your history. And so you look at it that way. I can't say you're wrong or right. Does that apply to other countries? And when has the Europeans, and in this case, Klaus Schwab, ever been slow to criticize the United States? And that's what kind of irritates me is everybody has a criticism of the United States. But when it comes to China, all of a sudden, we're going to tap dance around the issue. And he goes on to explain it like this, just to show you how he desperately wants to avoid any sort of outright condemnation. He says this: "Pursuing further the quantum world metaphor mentioned earlier, it could be inferred from quantum physics that objective reality does not exist. We think that observation and measurement define an objective opinion, but the micro world of atoms and particles, like the macro world of geopolitics, is governed by the strange rules of quantum mechanics in which two different observers are entitled to their own opinions. This is called a superposition. Particles can be in several places or states at once. In the world of international affairs, if two different observers are entitled to their own opinions, that makes them subjective but no less real and no less valid. So in an effort to not criticize China, he's bringing up quantum mechanics. He's quite literally bending time and space in order to not make any judgments of the Chinese government. And it goes further than that. He goes on to outline three different scenarios. One is where China is the eventual winner of this geopolitical battle, and the other one is where the United States is the winner, and the third scenario is where there's no winner. Now, his point of view is, as a European, we're not picking sides. We're going to work with whatever the result is, whether it be China, United States, or something in between. And so we as Americans, if we're looking for help from Europe in order to contain China, I don't think we're going to get that help. And to make matters worse, it does seem like half the United States government is also the same mind. So any candidate that we as conservatives or people on the right support, if they do not have a hard line and a clear stance on China, then that should be a non-starter. They should not get our vote. And if they're in office right now, they should be primaried. Another issue in this grand global vision of international cooperation, it requires that all the countries, especially the major countries, are cooperative. Klaus Schwab gives no indication on how he would incorporate a country like China that is uncooperative and belligerent in this global system. Now, he wrote this book in 2020 when they thought that the origin of the coronavirus was a wet market in Wuhan. And now every day we're getting more information that suggests that maybe it leaked from a lab in Wuhan. So we are seeking this cooperation from China. The WHO is asking for their help. They're asking for access to records, interviews with their scientists, and China is stonewalling all of this. How do we have this international order when we have a belligerent superpower? And this question is not answered. And my fear is that as the United States and Europe become, I guess, what's the word? More sustainable, which is usually a code word for we're going to ratchet down our economy, we're going to slow down our production and level off our GDP. And that's actually the goal of many economists, especially those on the far left, is to have a GDP that's level and more of a redistributive model rather than a growth model. If we do that and China continues onward, gobbling up resources, buying into other countries, what does this world look like in 30 years? And I think the Europeans, and I think in this case Klaus Schwab, I think they're being very short-sighted. I don't think they truly understand how fanatical that government is. They do have thousands of years of cultural and ethnic solidarity, a large homogeneous country. They do have the potential to be not a world player, but the dominant country in the world. And I think they're bent on that. That is part of their 50-year plan if you're not paying attention. China's plan is not to be a global player. It is to be the global player. And we're on that trajectory right now where in 30, 40, 50 years, maybe even sooner, China will get there. On my next video, I'm going to talk about the trilemma. And this has to do with nationalism. And we can tie this into President Trump and why it was so important for the elites to make sure that Trump did not win in 2020. See you then.